Hello and welcome to another town hall meeting. We're in February and it's a wonderful opportunity to continue in our series of Catholic social teachings because they give us a sense of bringing us together even more deeply into being in communion with each other. There's nobody on this earth that needs to be left out of what it means to be together as a human race, as a people of God. And so we're looking for those opportunities tonight especially. So how do we find people, how do we notice, recognize people who fall through the cracks and all of a sudden they're homeless, all of a sudden they have no sense of community, no direction, no mission? That's our concern this evening. And knowing what that means, this past weekend I put together a little sense of when we know our purpose in life, we can find our mission. When we know what it means to live and love as God asks us to do and are called to do, then what does that mean in how we interact with each other, how we respect each other, and how we lift each other up when we need to? So this evening especially, we're looking at a sense of all kids are our kids. All our children are all of our children. It's all of who we are as a community of faith, a community in this world. And what are the rights and responsibilities that we have toward our children, toward the kids in our world? Again, whether they live in my house or in your house or down the street or across town or across the world. How do we recognize the need for us to look out for each other no matter where we are, who we are, what we look like, or what language we speak? So we're going to take a great opportunity to just come together in prayer and in discussion and dialogue to see how we can, again, come together as a community of faith and hope. And so let us take a moment in prayer. Lord, you are our communion, you are our faith, you are the one who brings that hope and goodness into our hearts and souls, that each one of us may know that we all belong to each other as the body of Christ, whether hand or foot, arm, adult, child, we all are people who come together in that faith and hope. So we ask this evening we may open ourselves up to seeing the world in a little different way, a little different possibility of how we are interconnected, interrelated into the ways of the Spirit, the Holy Spirit in which we dwell. So bless us, gift us on our journey. Bless our speaker, Andrea, who brings about a great sense of faith and hope in her life, and how we as a parish and as a community can respond to the needs that are in front of us. As we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Tony's going to share a few things on a video as well as then introduce our speaker for the evening.
Thanks, Father Tom. Just a little truth in advertising. The title for tonight's evening, the town hall meeting, All Kids Are Our Kids, comes from a book that I read a number of years ago from Search Institute, and it talked about building developmental assets in young people and how to create environments and structures and kind of like this scaffolding around young people to make sure that as they grew up, they had both within themselves and outside of themselves what it took, what they needed to be really positive people. And I was always taken by that title of that book, All Kids Are Our Kids, because I really have always believed that in my youth ministry days, through my ministry formation days, and now in my work in mission outreach here at Resurrection. So as we talk about rights and responsibilities and this notion that when we talk about Catholic social teaching, there are certain basic rights that every person needs, from housing to clothing to good food, healthy food, clean water, clean air, insurance, education. Those are some of the basic things that people need. And yet the rest of us in this world and in this country have a responsibility to provide, to make sure that everybody in our communities have these basic needs, but sometimes they don't. And so tonight we're going to hear a story of a young man who grew up with not having some of those basic needs and wound up living a homeless life, a life of under a bridge for a time. It'll be a story of him encountering people at school and in the community who had that responsibility to give him some of the basics that he needed to survive and to thrive. So as we try to do with all the town hall meetings, either live and in person or on video, here's a story to get us into this topic of all kids are our kids.
One of my buddies, Johnny, always tells me, you need to learn what you're about. Find your spark. Find your why. It's hard to think of change when you're so used to being homeless. You kind of put a limit on yourself. Growing up, it was just my twin brother and my dad, and my father was physically and mentally abusive. We ended up living on the streets for a while, in and out of the foster care system until I was 16.
So this is a bridge where we slept under, and we literally just come up here after school or sports, set down a blanket, and go to bed.
When you're living under a bridge, your primary focus isn't your Spanish quiz or your math homework. It's, what is my dad upset about today? Is he gonna snap on us? Do we have food for tonight? Do we have a safe place to sleep?
There's so many homeless kids out there that this is a reality, and it's awful to think about. This is a life nobody should ever have to live.
In the beginning of high school, my brother and I slept in the dugouts at our school.
So this provided us with an overhang, help us get out of the rain and snow or anything like that. This was our home for a little bit.
That was really a place for us to escape to, kind of our own little space, even though it wasn't. I guess you could call school the stable part of our life. It was a place that we could go to where we knew we wouldn't be harmed. The programs that the schools offer to these kids are so important. Having the ability to have free reduced lunch and not have to worry about, can you get lunch today because you don't have enough money in your account. Being able to do sports when they're reduced cost or free is huge. My wrestling coach was a firefighter, and that's the reason that I became a firefighter, because I really liked who he was as a person, and I wanted to be like him.
This is like taking me way back. Yeah, that's funny that we're still up there.
I have been volunteering with my department for 3.5 years now, and I've worked so hard for the opportunity to showcase my abilities to be a career firefighter. I just recently started interviewing for a fire department job up north, and if they give me the opportunity to be a career member with them, it means I get to do what I love for the rest of my life. The drive that I have to be successful and make the most out of any situation is because of my past. A year ago, I started a nonprofit to help guide those kids exiting the foster care system, showing them that they can do anything that they've set their mind to. The name of the nonprofit is Be Relentless.
We drove up here to Port Angeles yesterday. They were doing a meeting, convening over all the liaisons and talking about what they can do to help each other out.
And that way they know where I'm at for any additional supports and needs, and then I can help.
I've never seen so many different resources come together and build off each other for the success of the students. I started the day feeling, I guess the right word is defeated. I'd been working at this career in the fire service for 4 years. I had expected to get a phone call from this interview last week, Friday. And I get a phone call from a number, and I'm like, man, I think this might be it. Yeah, that'd be great. It hits you like a freight train, and you don't even realize that this changes your life forever.
Got it.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That was the offer.
Good for you.
So you're the face of why we do what we do here.
Yep.
Yeah. That's exactly it. Right?
Hey Jenny, I just got a job offer. It's definitely one of the best feelings I've had in my entire life. You know, 10 years ago today, I was under a bridge and then in and out of the dugouts at my school. Now I have a career as a firefighter. It means the world and then some.
It's quite a story of a young man who had a person or persons in his life, wrestling coach, other people in the community, teachers, who believed in him and gave him the support to eventually get him to the spot where he became as a firefighter. Not everybody makes that, as we know. But tonight we have somebody in our midst who has been that person for a lot of young people and a lot of families in our community, and particularly in the Ashwaubenon school system, and that is Andrea Pasqualucci. I've known Andrea for, probably about 15 years or so. Met her in her work on the Brown County Homeless and Housing Coalition as we went to meetings, and endless meetings, it seemed like, together. As she was working at the Ashwaubenon schools as a social worker, and I was getting involved with Streetlights Outreach and St. John's Homeless Shelter and some of those things. And I also got to witness her work at Nativity Parish as she was serving on the Social Concerns Committee there and a faithful member of that parish as well. So she is a social worker for the Ashwaubenon public school system. She's also in the UWGB Social Work Program Advisory Committee. She's a graduate of UWGB. That's where she received her Bachelor of Social Work. And then she's also received a Master of Social Work from UW-Madison. In 2014 and 2015, she was the recipient of Wisconsin's Special Services Teacher of the Year Award. I remember her receiving that and her appearing in the newspaper for that, for her work as a school social worker at Valley View Elementary School in Ashwaubenon at that time. She was also the 2015 winner of the Ethics in Business Award from what is now Foundations Health and Wholeness. And I know back then that award was given to one person each year, and she was a recipient. And so that is a big deal. So she has been described as a tireless advocate for students and families and someone with a passion for working with people in need. She's known for going above and beyond to make sure students' needs and the families' needs are met outside of the classroom to be successful in school. This past summer, when we were trying to decide who would speak tonight about this topic, as you know, for the Packers, we'll be looking at who's going to be the #1 draft pick, for the Packers in April. Back in late summer, early fall, when we were looking at who would be the speaker for tonight, Andrea definitely was my #1 draft pick, and I'm so glad she said yes. So let's welcome Andrea Pasqualucci.
Hello, thank you, Tony. That was kind. I'm sure my offer is going to come soon. Packer contract. As Tony said, my name is Andrea Pasqualucci. I am a school social worker with the Ashwaubenon School District. I am also the school district's homeless liaison. So every public school in the United States has to designate what's called a homeless liaison. I'm that for the Ashwaubenon School District. All of the school districts in the area have them, and we all work very closely together, even though we're with different school districts. This person is responsible for implementing the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. The McKinney-Vento Act is federal legislation that give protections to what we call highly mobile students. So sometimes they're referred to as homeless students, more often students experiencing homelessness. These students have certain rights and it is up to each homeless liaison to make sure those students' rights are followed in each school district. Let me give you an example of why that's important. So back 20 years ago, I'll use my daughter for example. If my daughter lived in Ashwaubenon and attended Ashwaubenon schools, and then we became homeless and I had to move to De Pere with my sister, my daughter would have to re-enroll into the De Pere school district. So you had to attend school where you laid your head or where you slept at night. Then when my sister's cramped apartment, it got too stressful and there's too much screaming and I had to leave, I would go over to Freedom House, which is in the city of Green Bay. And I would have to re-enroll my daughter, in the Green Bay school district. So now my daughter's in her third school in a matter of months. When I'm done with Freedom House, they might be able to help me secure some kind of shelter or apartment someplace. That might be in the Howard-Suamico school district. So then I have to move my daughter to the Howard-Suamico school district. So you kind of understand when they say highly mobile students, why a law was enacted to ensure that students who are highly mobile because they don't have a reliable place to stay can count on some stability in their school district. So when I talk about the liaison making sure that the rights of these students are protected, what I mean by that is, and I'll get into this a little bit more later, but once you've been identified as being a student experiencing homelessness, you have certain rights. And one of those rights is you have the right to be transported back to your school of origin. So in my example, my daughter started out school in Ashwaubenon. As I kept moving around, my daughter would have the right to remain in the Ashwaubenon school district, and the school districts would coordinate how that transportation would work. So when we were in De Pere, we'd get that figured out, then we'd switch busing or gas cards. Somehow we'd figure it out, so the school's responsible for the transportation to get that student back to the school of origin, the original school, to maintain that stability and continuity in education. Studies have shown that every time a student changes schools during the school year, they lose 3 to 6 months of their education. So that's because of the emotional stress that goes along with it. There's always a gap. No one ever leaves one school on Friday and enrolls in the other school on Monday. Different school districts are at different points in the curriculum throughout the year. So you can see my daughter, if she went to 4 school years, 4 different schools, it might almost be a wash that school year because she's constantly trying to socially fit in, learn her teachers have to get to know her, so you kind of understand that. So the definition that we have to follow for the McKinney-Vento in the schools is a little different than some other programs. So you might, when you think of a homeless person, you might automatically think of the young man, I think his name was Jared, in the video, sleeping under a bridge. The McKinney-Vento homeless definition is not that you have to be unsheltered. So it includes students who lack fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So I have to look at those 3 words every time I identify a student. I might have a student who's living, in an apartment, but there's 8 people in a 1-bedroom apartment. I would deem that to not be adequate. There's of course more guidance to go along with this. And then fixed and regular, we have, is this my water? Can I grab this? I got it, Tony. I apologize, I'm coming off of a little sickness, so I'm a little, dry in my throat. The most common definition of homelessness that we find in our area, and it's about 75% of the kids that we identify as homeless, are students who are doubled up for financial reasons. So if me and my children move in with my parents because I can't afford my own house, and it's due to financial reasons, that family would be considered homeless. So that my child or children would qualify as homeless. And the reason for that is many of our families who can't make it on their own, they don't have a lot of resources to draw from extended family. So if you're living in a situation that you don't have your own bedroom, or as soon as someone gets stressed out, they can kick you out, or your kids are loud, you have a baby and a little one, and it's just hard for people to be around little kids, and you get kicked out easily, that's not a proper environment for a student to do their homework or have a quiet place to study or to keep their belongings. So students who are doubled up for financial reasons are considered homeless under McKinney-Vento. Other situations might be families living in hotels or motels, and this is far more common than you would imagine. I'll quickly tell you, so I live in Ashwaubenon, or I work in Ashwaubenon. A few years ago, I wrote a grant, and I found that the little community of Ashwaubenon had just as many hotels and motels as the entire city of Green Bay. And of course, that's because we have Lambeau Field near us, and the Resch Center, and all of that stuff. So at one time, I think I counted 54 students living in one hotel in Ashwaubenon. And I've been in those hotel rooms. There are 6 people with all of their belongings, with cartons of milk up against the window in the winter to keep it cold. I mean, just, they have a shelter over their head, but that's about all they have, a shelter. We have families living in campgrounds, cars. We have many. We do have many shelters in our area. So you've heard of Freedom House and Golden House and House of Hope. They are tremendous partners in working with us, but their capacity is limited. And we also work with unaccompanied youth. So these are kids under the age of 18, actually under McKinney-Vento, as long as they're enrolled in school, and you can actually be enrolled in school up to age 21. So if you're enrolled in school under the age of 21 and you're unaccompanied, which means you are not living with a parent or guardian, you're considered an unaccompanied youth, and we would also identify those students. Okay, numbers-wise, I went back to 18-19 because as you can imagine, the past couple school years with COVID have thrown us all off, and our numbers are all over the place. 18-19 school year, in Brown County, there was 1,330 students who are identified as being homeless. And that's the definition I just shared with you. A little perspective, the majority of them were in the Green Bay School District. They had 1,074 students. But just to kind of now compare that to Ashwaubenon, De Pere, West De Pere, Howard, Swamco, Ashwaubenon had 79 homeless students enrolled that year. Okay, so we can see this is a large number. These aren't even students that have other things going on who are facing stressors. These are just students who don't have a fixed, adequate nighttime residence. Okay, once we identify a student as homeless, they have some protections. First of all, we have to immediately enroll them. So I have families who come from various places and they are at a hotel or motel. I need to immediately enroll them, which means I can't, I have to wait to get your records, or you don't have a birth certificate, I can't enroll you. Once you're identified as homeless, you enroll them immediately, and then my job as a homeless liaison is to collect all of the data that school, or the forms that schools need to enroll students. But they have to be immediately enrolled. Some school districts see children who are experiencing homelessness as a little more work, so sometimes you'll run into people in the district who want to drag their feet in hopes that they move on to the next hotel a few days later. So as the homeless liaison, I have to really advocate, and my colleagues, also have to really advocate for these students, because you can see how that would work too, right? So now they're out a week, and then they go to the next hotel, and that school district drags their feet, and they're out another week. So that's what we have to ensure: immediate enrollment. We have to provide all school supplies, free breakfast and lunch, transportation back to the school of origin, which I talked to you guys about that already. And here's where I like to kind of talk about how the community can contribute or help us address the needs of these students. So this federal legislation is an unfunded mandate, okay? So they enacted the legislation and they said, schools, you figure out how to implement it. So the school has to pay my salary. They also have to pay for all this transportation. So the last time I checked, and it probably was back around 18-19 school year, the Ashwaubenon School District paid $40,000 in transportation for these students to get back to Ashwaubenon. And it's fine, it's our job, we do it, it's not a problem. But you can see how sometimes advocates might get pushback on enrolling students when the cost goes up and schools are strapped for money. So it's not great, but it's a reality sometimes that we have to deal with. We do reach out. The other thing I should tell you is any grants we receive, federal funding, state funding, and again, it is grants because it's unfunded mandate. There's always strings attached. I think you all probably kind of know how that works. So Tony and I were talking before this, with COVID, there's a lot of money floating around out there that they'll say for homeless kids or so on, but there's so many strings attached. They say, here's more money, but you can only use it for the things we already said you could use it for. So it gets a little frustrating because we have to get creative in what students need and how we can use those funds. But what we have gotten creative in this community as McKinney-Vento liaisons as a whole is we've really developed some great partnerships. So I'm going to speak to Ashwaubenon, but any homeless liaison could give you these examples. As a group, as a county group, we do have a United Way grant, which we get a proportionate amount of money from the grant as the number of homeless students. So for example, Ashwaubenon gets like $1,000 a year, say, based on the total grant and how many students we have compared to Green Bay and the other county districts. We develop partnerships with our churches. So in Ashwaubenon, I have 3 churches that I work very, very closely with. One of them has a food pantry. When I was younger and very excited about my job, I wanted to open a food pantry in my school. And my superintendent said, no, you are not doing that. And he told me that we have a food pantry in Ashwaubenon. Let's partner with them. Let's let them do the work. They're good at it. They know what they're doing. So what we do instead is we have 9 food drives a year. 1 month, we all take turns. Each school takes turn having a food drive. We donate it all up to the pantry. And then basically we have a key to the pantry. So when our families need something, we have access to whatever food we need. We developed something called Loads of Love. I don't know, this parish might even do that. We collect money around February 14th, and Nativity Church holds that money for me. And every so often, I transfer $300 or $400 over to our local laundromat. They keep a tally for me, and then I can send people there with vouchers. We partner with several community groups for holiday programs. In Ashwaubenon, we like to say anybody who needs a gift will get a gift over the holidays. And as long as I've been there, we've been able to do that. So we're pretty creative in helping out people over the holidays. We have weekend food packs. So I have community members, various groups bring in a set bag of food every week. We probably get 5 a week. I have another group that wants to get books into people's hands. So I have a whole bookshelf of books, and as food comes in, I know which families are getting them, and we put books in the bag, so we're getting more books into the homes of these students. We have something called Ash Cares, which is a volunteer system where you provide your email address, and as we have a need in Ashwaubenon, it just goes out, blind email to everybody. And if you have a bed you're not using, if you have a couch, if you have 4T pants, snow boots, you can donate those to families in need. Of course, it goes to the social workers. It's all confidential. We have boutiques in schools, so we have clothes and hygiene items in all of that stuff that we can bring kids down and they can take what they need. And then, of course, school supplies. And I think any school district in your community could give you a list of things that they need or could help their students. The McKinney-Vento law, as you can tell, is really aimed at education and what we can do to help support them to be stable in school and to graduate and have some success and stability. It's all the extra stuff, the programs that we have to develop. We can't do that alone, of course, so partnering with community groups who are willing to take on a piece of it or organize something for us is something we're always looking for. Just a few more things, and then I think we're good on time, Tony? Okay. couple of things, when we're educating these students, some of their unique needs are hunger. Now, since COVID, you all probably are familiar with, there was an eviction moratorium for a while. So my numbers went down. Then the government increased food share, which is, it used to be known as food stamps. They increased that. They did a whole lot of things during COVID, and families were getting by. The child care tax credit, families were getting by. I still think in Ashwaubenon, we're kind of still riding that wave. They also said all students at school get free breakfast, lunch, and the USDA is reimbursing schools to provide dinners as well. So now all of a sudden, the need for food is going down a little bit. Universal breakfast and lunch, by the way, is going to be an issue coming up as far as if that's something that should be continued. And I'll tell you, I don't know if any of you feel the need to do something bigger than what we do locally and advocate with our legislators to have that be permanent. That has been a blessing to our families and to staff who don't have to jump through the hoops of understanding if a student is eligible or not. Everybody gets free breakfast and lunch and a snack. So that's really taking care of that issue for us. Untreated medical needs, lack of reliable transportation is huge, very huge for our families. Increased anxiety, of course, if they're not living in a stable place. The gentleman on the screen kind of talked about that, not knowing when he went home what his dad would be like. Sounds like he lived in a couple different places, maybe not knowing where he was going to go. And how does he study for a Spanish quiz when he's dealing with all of that? Sometimes we have limited parent engagement. A lot of my families are working 2 jobs. They're tired. They have to sleep when their kids are in school. So it's sometimes hard to engage with the parents. Gaps in education we talked about. Lack of sense of belonging. Any of you who have children know that when they get into school, they develop their friendships and they join certain activities, and there's just that sense of belonging. It sounds like the gentleman on the screen did find that in his school. Many of our students don't because they can't get home after practices. So those are a few of the things that we have to be aware of when we're working with students. And my last thought is, the gentleman on the screen said he lived under a bridge. Know that most 80% of our students, that is not their living situation. But the McKinney-Vento law says that the other areas limit their psychological and physical development, I think are the words they use, and that's not deemed appropriate for children. And there was one more point I was going to make. Tony, we talked about it before. Oh yeah, thank you, Tony. So the other thing, this gentleman ended up being a firefighter, and he looks like he's doing well for himself. Know that that is not a reality for many of our kids. I was telling Tony that I'm working with a student now who is in college, which in my 15 years, I think he's the second student I've worked with who has gone into college. And not that that's the only route, but that is the route he's taken. And he was, again, because of the limited way I can use funds, I'm not able to do much for him because he's now graduated and not part of my school system. But he was telling me how he has to rent a computer from his university every semester, and he has to turn it back in at the end of the semester because I'm sure they have to check it and make sure it's under warranty and working and so on. Then he has to go back and get another one. And he said sometimes that doesn't happen at the beginning of the semester and he gets behind, and he's going on to tell me how he was in the dorms because he didn't have anywhere to go, but the food places were closed. So he wasn't complaining. He was just kind of telling me this stuff. So I was able to reach out to a local business who donated a used computer. Actually, they had 2 I could pick from. So I emailed him and I said, which of these computers would you like? One was like a lighter one, I guess, not so powerful, and the other one was a heavier one, more powerful. And I said, which one can I send down to you? And he emailed back and he said, I don't know. Like, what do you think? And, you know, I just thought about, I have a son who's a sophomore in college and a daughter who's a senior in high school. And when they need to know what kind of computer to buy, they call me, they go, Mom, what do you think? And let's Google it, let's figure it out, right? These kids do not have that. I once had somebody tell me, I just need someone to hold my hand. You know, it can be that simple, like a mentor or somebody to help me along the way or to help me figure out what computer I need. So, well, it's great, the story is great. I think our students who experience homelessness many of them go on to face challenges because they don't have those resources, like maybe some of us in this room have, of the support, you know, and comfort of other people who are stable and can kind of show us the way. Okay, thank you.
Andrea, thank you so much for opening our eyes to the reality of homeless young people in our community. I'm sure we've got a lot of questions. I know I have a lot of questions. I hope people in the audience do too, as well as people sitting at home. But I better turn it over to Father Tom to, you know, maybe ask the first one.
Because I really just want to do the first one, and then you two know a whole lot more about homeless, and some of you out there might know more than I do. I think, as you said, I think it was Jared in the video. And I was sitting there, and I had tears in my eyes, and the tears were coming down. I was like, wow, you know, this isn't about, you gave a lot of reasons how we can help out and kind of get them to move from here to there and have a little something in their stomach to eat. But the underlying issue is kind of what you said in the end. They don't have anybody. There's nobody in their life that can confidently say, you're doing a great job, and let me help you, let me point you in this direction, or give you a little advice or whatever that they might need in that moment. But that lack of confidence, you know, how do you mature in a healthy way when you have no idea, as he said?
How do you know what you don't know, or what you haven't been taught or hasn't been modeled for you?
Yeah. I mean, it's just extremely sad. You know, and there are situations where the families got their home, they've got their car, they're stable in the sense of they live in the same place. But there's so much of that families that seem good and healthy people aren't. You know, and again, so many children fall through the cracks and don't have that sphere of hope and possibility and. You know, how do you dream when you're living under a bridge, or when you don't know if you're going to be in this motel or that motel, or you know what mom or dad is going to do tomorrow? How do you dream? How do you know? So just the emotional aspect of watching those situations happening, and then from my point of view is how do we help?
Yeah, it's almost like a luxury to be able to dream, right? If you're Because if you're thinking about where you're sleeping that night, or what shape dad's gonna be when you get home, or if you have food on the table, right? Like how do you think about the future when you're kind of caught up in?
Right.
Yeah.
As you mentioned a couple times, you know, the kids get, I don't know what word you use, but they get stagnated. They're stuck. You know, and imagining any kind of abuse or trauma, you know, puts you back, and you're stuck for a long time before you can get out of that.
I think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where, you know, the bottom rung is food, clothing, shelter, you know, and if those aren't taken care of, how do you go to the next level, the next level, the next level? Right. You know, it's hard when you're hungry, you know, or when you're fighting for a place to sleep at night.
So kind of homelessness, hopelessness. I mean, they seem to really tie together.
It certainly can be.
Yeah.
Question I had was kind of related
real quick,
to that.
I got a commercial thing here. So if you're home and watching right now on Tuesday, February 8th, please, I have my phone. If you want to chat in an idea or comment, and those of you in church here, please raise your hand, and do we have a runner?
We've got Susan
Mike? Okay,
Perel
Susan's
with
got a runner there?
Yeah.
All right.
Related to that, I always think about the cycle or circle of poverty, right? So I would imagine or assume that the people that are in the McKinney-Vento situation don't have parents or in the picture, or have parents who themselves perhaps were raised in poverty. Do you see that that kind of that cycle or circle of poverty in what you do?
Yes and no. So one thing we do see in the schools is our students who are homeless, their situations vary immensely. So we can work with, something very common is a two-parent household with both parents working, and they're living in a hotel because they can't save enough money to get a apartment, you know, first and last month's rent, whatever you need, you know, and then pay for everything else they need. So I had a family living in a hotel in Ashwaubenon. Both parents were working, take away childcare, you know, just all the expenses. They could not get ahead. So it's not always students without parents. So right now, unaccompanied youth in Ashwaubenon, I think we have 8. I don't know what that number is for all Brown County or Green Bay, but that's a segment. We do definitely have families who have that generational poverty. So their parents grew up like this. That's what they know. That's what they see. They haven't been taught maybe a different way. They haven't been given the tools. So we also see that. But we definitely see families who are just struggling, who just can't make it out of that situation to get their own place. And I should say too, you know, I always laugh. I've talked about homelessness for 15 years, and really when you think about it, how you solve the problem is to like build more homes, right? Like get the kids housed, right? We'll take away a lot of problems. There's a study done recently, Tony might know this better than I do, but in our area we're 8,000 units short of what we need to properly house everybody. I think that's gotten a little better last I heard.
But we heard the number last night. Kitty, what was the number? 3,700.
We're at 3,700.
3,700 units, yeah.
So
still a lot of units.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was curious if the number of McKinney-Vento students, the numbers I saw recently in the Press Times, I think it was, had come down just a little bit. I think from 1,350 or so was the highest I think I've ever seen it, down to, I thought it was a little over 1,000, maybe 1,100 students, something like that. You kind of alluded to it, but I'm wondering, is that kind of going to be a COVID blip in a sense?
I think so.
Okay.
But also unemployment is so low right now that I don't know if that will keep our numbers down for a while because people are able to find jobs. You know, you can see now that I think McDonald's is paying $15 an hour, which was not true 3 years ago, I don't think. So I'm curious. I do think it was COVID because remember there's a eviction moratorium. There have been increased assistance to families, so I think that has to do with it. I'm curious if we stay low for a while because of unemployment and people can find decent paying jobs, or if we're going to shoot back up.
One more numbers question, and then I'll let Tom jump in. I remember being on the Brown County Homeless Housing Coalition years ago. People there, some of them would be a little jumpy about saying that there are 1,300 homeless kids in Brown County schools because there's a way that gets figured. It's not like on any particular day. I don't think it's true, right, that there are
Correct.
Like right now 1,100 students in Brown County that are homeless. So how does that number get arrived at that you see in the newspaper?
Sure. So we have to report back to the state how many students we serve, how many students we've identified as homeless. And how they ask us to report is students that you've identified as homeless during that school year. So when I said 1,330 in the 2018-19 school year, that means that many students were identified as homeless. They weren't doubled. If they came to Green Bay and De Pere and Howard-Zomico, we didn't count them 4 times. That's not how that works. But if my daughter was identified as homeless and we were in a hotel for 2 weeks and then I found an apartment, she still would be counted as one student, even though, 2 months from now she wouldn't be homeless. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so through the course of the school year, 1,330 students were homeless in that year.
At one point,
But
yes.
not necessarily at one point, but through the year.
Correct.
The cumulative effect was 1,330,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Comments, questions out there? No? 'Cause I was looking at, I was thinking about it as you're talking, that, yeah, those 1,300 whatever would be considered, not have a stable roof over their head. But you also mentioned that, by that time, they're probably way behind in a lot of different developmental, educational goals. And so even if your daughter got in there and now she is in an apartment, she still carries with her a whole lot of help along the way that she needs to get caught up and healthy again.
Yep.
Right?
So, yeah, both academically and like social emotionally. And there are programs in school to catch kids up and so on and so forth. So for 2 weeks, you're probably okay. But yeah, our kids who are, for those of you here, if your children, if you think of how much time your kids spend on homework, maybe not as much as we would like, but they have time. Think of your child didn't spend any of that time on homework. How would they be doing in school? I've been in apartments where I go in the library and says, if you're going to be there, see if you can find these 3 library books. And I'm like, okay. And there are just so many people and all of your belongings in a small space. I can see how you can't find the library books or you don't have a spot just to put your backpack, to take stuff out to give to your parent or to sit down and there's not a seat to sit down and do your homework. So what schools are doing is we shift a lot of that learning to in school or before or after school. We help them with homework because what we can't do is lower the expectations for our students who are homeless. That's not going to help. So we have to keep the high expectations, but we have to, we call it double dosing and doing various things. Maybe they do their math flashcards with a senior volunteer. We have different strategies to try to kind of recapture that time that they might not have at home.
I mean, it sounds like what we've been hearing from a lot of families during this COVID time, that those who were at home trying to keep up with lessons and they're, I've heard a lot of teachers talk about, they're watching their home situation and, the kid who's supposed to be watching is sleeping on the couch or they're, playing with something or doing something else. I mean, that's a situational situation now, situational thing now because of COVID, or has been, but this is ongoing with homelessness.
And obviously COVID just made it that much worse for kids who are experiencing homelessness.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you talk about I would imagine there's a spectrum or continuum of young people in the schools because you talk about free breakfast, lunch, and now dinner, reduced cost, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And then there's McKinney-Vento kids. And so what's the spectrum of kids? And in a school system like yours, what's like the percentage of people in those different categories on the spectrum? So
the Ashwaubenon schools as a whole, I think we're right around 36% free reduced lunch. My school, I'm at Valley View School, and we're pushing about 45% kids who now remember, everybody gets free breakfast and lunch now, but there's incentive to still fill the form out because then we can waive fees. So now everyone has to rent a computer. We're always up in the game in schools, and money's a factor that's going to really determine if you can kind of keep up with all of that stuff. So now you have to rent a computer at our school. So people will get a free device if they qualify for free reduced lunch. So we are still getting people filling that out. It goes up. I wrote down, I think Ashwaubenon was, in 2001, we had 10% of our students free and reduced lunch. And this year we're at 36%. So yeah, those numbers climb.
Right. We got a question from the website. What can the average person do to help other than give money? You know, which can be good too, but, and then how can we get involved in mentoring these young kids?
So I never know if this is appropriate at these times, but I always have to throw this out there. I mean, giving money, making sure basic needs are met is you know, always a great thing. The real work needs to be, and I'm not going to get political, but really needs to be changing some systems that we all live in or function within. They're working for us, and maybe all of us in this room right now, but they're not working for everybody in society. So safe, affordable housing. We do have some housing in Green Bay that's not safe, right? So that's not the answer. Safe, affordable housing, having enough of it for all of our families, a living wage. I mean, when we have families working, you know, between two parents, 3-4 jobs, just so they can, you know, pay for housing and maybe transportation, get their kids, all that kind of stuff, it's too much. It's just too much for the parents, it's too much for the kids. Kids, as you all probably know, see the stress on their parents. So if we want to help kids, we have to advocate for a system in society that keeps our kids healthy and our parents healthy. A portion of our parents, I'm veering off a little bit, maybe I should back up. So I think at a macro level, I mean, really being kind of aware of what some of these systems are. And I think it's kind of hard when we live how we live. It's hard to kind of like understand things from another perspective. But we have a lot of systems in our society that are not helpful to people who are not, you know, middle class or above. So I think any you know, action you can take on that part, people would be helping immensely. I mentioned universal breakfast and lunch. I mean, if that just came to be a regular thing for schools, it would take a whole lot of issues off the plate for teachers, administrators, students, and parents.
It's an easy mark to be able to say, you know, they shouldn't be here, or those families, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You know, those families should this and that. And what I'm hearing is the possibility of how can we learn more about where people are at and understand their story, so that whether we're advocating, whether we're talking to our neighbor, whether we're voting, whatever it may be, that we can hear a different story and act on that instead of educating ourselves.
Yes, I get frustrated, and not everybody's fortunate to be in a position that I am, that I get to know families very well, right, and work with them sometimes 5 years in a row. But I get very frustrated when people make comments, pull yourselves up by the bootstraps, you know, various comments like that, when they have never spent a considerable amount of time with people in poverty. And Tony, I know you have, and you could probably just attest to that too, but you know, in Wisconsin, we have state leaders who are saying, you know, it's not society's problem to take care of children. Well, that's the kind of stuff I think, no matter where we are on the political spectrum, we kind of have to push back on a little, because if you knew these families are trying the best they can. Poverty is not a glamorous lifestyle. Nobody wants to live in this situation. People do what they can to get out. They just simply either don't know how or don't have the tools to do so.
And then often sitting in front of the television is like, now why do we have this shooting over here? And why do those people, you know, we can see it, why don't we have, nobody wants to work these days. Well, when you're coming out of that kind of poverty cycle, you don't have the skills, you don't have what you need to really pull it all together for the next generation and the next generation, right?
So they start talking about barriers, right? And some of the families and the children have, you know, more and more barriers to try to overcome. It can be really, really difficult. I'm curious, you've been in this, I'll call it ministry, but it's work ministry for 20 years. I feel like it's almost like a job interview when I ask a question like this, but like, what have been the biggest challenges in that? But what have been some of the joyful moments and the positive things that you take from this?
Well, you know, the challenges are, I think, people not understanding. The challenges are not working with students and the parents. The challenges are the roadblocks, like other adults might throw up. So, and I have a great administration at Ashwaubenon. They're very supportive, and I think most are, but you know,
We'll ship this tape to them too. By the
I
way.
know, I was like,
A raise will be coming your
forgot
way.
Ravine
Yeah.
tape. But no, but when adults throw up roadblocks, and that could, I'll be honest, that could be teachers, right? So, you know, teachers don't believe the way I think all the time, which is okay. But when I'm trying to kind of educate and explain, and they're in a classroom with 25, 30 kids, right? So I fully understand where they're coming from, but when they can't understand that we need to do things a little differently, or the student might not fit into this mold, so we might have to do it that way, that gets me frustrated. I think what we talked about earlier with people just not knowing these families and making assumptions about them and writing them off and not wanting them here or not wanting to understand their situation and help.
I can imagine
barriers.
I can imagine it's frustrating. I mean, we go back a few years and the learning disabilities when we finally discovered how we can help that population along, but there's in the meantime they're sitting in the classroom, and you're trying to teach 30 kids, and you got one who's whatever, and you know how do you? It is frustrating.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and I don't lay blame anywhere. I think we're all on our own. I mean, it's my job to understand this stuff, so it's a teacher's job to teach. But I do think in recent years teachers are starting to understand the large role that they play in student lives. My dad was a teacher for 36 years, and he was a teacher. He went in and everyone sat quietly, and he taught, and he came home, and you know that's not the job anymore. So.
Yeah. So what would be in a homeless situation? We got another. Yep. Just real quick. When in a homeless situation where a child is sitting in the classroom, I mean, ADD, they're flipping around, whatever else. What are the characteristics of are they just not prepared like others? Are they not participating like others? Are they?
Again, I don't think there's like a typical homeless student, but what I will say is, you know, they're often disheveled, not prepared homework-wise, you know, not getting homework in. Oftentimes the students who are being picked up late. So one of our transportation options are gas cards, and some parents like that because it might help them out a little along the way. And sometimes those kids are there a little longer than they should be because they haven't gotten picked up because, you know, I could go on forever and telling you reality. Some of these families, they don't have reliable cars, so that's an issue. So I would say it's more just wear the same clothes, quiet, disheveled. That I would say more than acting out, definitely.
Sure.
Thank you Thank you. You're doing a wonderful job. Really appreciate all your sharing with us. This is a little different angle. Just wondering, you know, we're in Black History Month. We have a lot of issues regarding all of the various immigrants. Is there any population statistic about the various groups in our community?
You know, I'm sure somebody has it. I do not. That's not, what we typically do is gather the data we need for state reporting. And that is a statistic that is gathered, but it's not something we report on. It's through the system. So there's actually a statewide system, it's called WiseDash, that there's different levels of access, but I think the public can go on it and you can kind of desegregate data. So I would be able to tell you that data's there, I just don't have it with me.
Kind of related is the within the LGBTQ community is there the non-binary, and is that kind of an issue coming up, and
Yep.
getting kicked out of homes? And
Yep, yes, definitely. And that's more at our high school. Our middle school has also, we have a middle school social worker, high school social worker. Both have had issues of students being kicked out. And if a student's kicked out, they're considered unaccompanied member if they're not living with a parent or guardian. And then they'd be considered doubled up for financial reasons. So we call it couch surfing. So some of our older kids will couch surf. So they'll come to my house because they're friends with my daughter and crash on my couch for a couple nights, and then they'll, go to some other friend's house. Yes, and we have identified that the issue of some of that population has been LGBTQ status and parents not accepting or wanting to work with the student.
Good.
I just wanted to say to you, congratulations for the work that you're doing. I can imagine you have many sleepless nights. You have many children, not just your own. But I'm coming from a little different area, I guess. I appreciate very much all a place to shelter children, and they're getting good food and all of these things, which are very necessary. But my question is, what about the children's feelings? I mean, some kids are going to make this, let's face it, they will be fine. But there's going to be others that are not going to make it. And my question is, do you have the social service agencies available to you for any counseling for kids like this?
Yeah, so there are a lot of counseling mental health agencies in the community that we work with and work very closely with. One thing, kind of a new trend that started in the schools is it's called school-based mental health counseling. So instead of, there's foundations and there's Innovative and Bellin has some mental health care, there's different agencies around. What school districts are doing now is contracting with those agencies to come into the schools. Now, I don't totally support it for various reasons, but here's where I do support it. What we've come to in our district is when there are so many barriers and obstacles for a student to get that mental health counseling outside of school, then we will offer it in school. We have a lot of families who say, yes, I agree, I see what you're saying, we're gonna go ahead and get counseling, and they do that on their own. But we do have kids who really need it, they ask for it, they want it, but their parents work in the evenings, the family doesn't have transportation. There are just so many different barriers that could prevent that now we can get them in to get some therapy at school.
Excellent. That's good. Because I think these parents, are coming from maybe the same backgrounds now that their children are. Mm-hmm. And I can see a family could use something like this. Not just the individual, but some of the kids, are going to have a tough time.
Yep. Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then in addition, there's like school social workers. Boy, they're really hiring a lot of school social workers to deal with some of these things. School counselors, school psychologists, nurses, we all work together to support in the school, but not like with some of the more global issues.
But it's just good that you have that available to you.
Yes.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Andrea, do you deal much with, I was intrigued by the fact that, and I think I knew this from my days down at St. John's, that you can be in high school until you're 21, but you age out of foster care at 18. Are you dealing with many kids in that 18 to 21 bracket? I know that's a growing population at St. John's. Kids that age out at 18 and nowhere to go, and so they wind up down there. I'm just curious, is that a reality that some people actually do stick around and stay in high school and yet get help through McKinney-Vento?
So they can stay in school till they're 21 if they
What's the scenario in high school that you're in till you're 21?
Yep. So you can stay in high school till you're 21 if you have special education needs. So if you have an IEP, you can get services until you're 21. I think it's the year you turn 21 at the end of that year or something. Other students may, be there 5 years if they don't have enough credit accrual. And there's some full disclosure, I am an elementary school social worker and the district liaison, so I'm a little rough on some of this stuff.
Right.
But some students, they say something like, if you're able to attain the credits you need to attain, then you can stay longer. But there are some students who didn't get any credits, and then they come at 18 and they go, I want to come back to high school, and that's just not.
No, it's probably out to GED land at that
Yeah.
point in time. But
yep.
the scenario would be like if you're held back because your home life is a mess, or you're couch surfing, or you're bouncing from house to house, or foster care to foster care situation. It might take you an extra 2 or 3 years to get that high school diploma if you don't go into the GED category.
Right.
I've just been to the St. John's for a few weeks, and there are a lot of young people. It's kind of striking to see that. But that wasn't my question. You had mentioned that one of the things was, changing systems, systemic change. Are there some issues up in legislature that's coming up that we could encourage people to be writing to our representatives, or something locally that's at Brown County that we might be better aware of? Are you aware of anything that we could, get behind and advocate? Yeah, like the breakfast thing. Is there? I mean, should we be writing to somebody about keeping breakfast and lunch going?
Yeah, I'm trying to think here now.
Well, if you don't know, you can let us know if you come
No,
up
there,
with it.
there, and I could probably get information, Tony, but there is a bill that's been introduced to continue it by a woman in California, and I can't think of which, and I don't know where that's at.
Well, we can look it up too.
But that's definitely something. I had another thought, and I lost it. I was just trying to think of something state. No, I lost it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No. I appreciate that you were challenging us to do some advocacy. Because
right?
that, sometimes when you have a critical mass of people to making it makes a change.
Yep.
You mentioned a little bit about the counseling and stuff earlier. Are there mentoring programs that the average person can?
Yeah, and I think the person who called in or submitted the question, asked that question. There have been, we have Boys and Girls Clubs and, some after-school programs that offer mentoring. In Ashwaubenon, I did try to start this very program. A young mom came in, and she was the one who had said to me, I just need someone to hold my hand. And that's when I really realized that the things I'm 53, and the things I still call my mom about, she doesn't have that. So I did try to start a community mentoring program, and here's what happened. I realized it was going to take far too much organization and proper training for me to develop. There's a program out of the county, it's called the PALS program. It's for little, kids when they're too young. Some people are shaking their head, for big brothers, big sisters. But that's exactly like what I have in my mind for young parents or people who need a little support, young 21-year-olds or who are out of school and don't have the support, or young parents. I have a lot of young parents come in with kindergarten or first graders. A lot of them are just struggling to understand, how school works and the importance of being on time and in getting their student there on time. So I don't know of any homeless youth mentoring program, right?
Right, yeah.
I know one we wanted to start.
I think Resurrection would be a great place for that to start. We did, and Tony, I think you sat with me. We did have a push for this.
We did, and Steve Meyer,
yes,
myself, it was
yes,
called the Jefferson Project, and
yes,
ran it through some of the school superintendents. They all seemed very interested.
Yeah.
and supportive. The thing we ran into was some of the logistics, and
Yes.
the main one being place. Like, what place would make some sense that would be a good place where, you know, like to feed young people into from the various school districts. And then life goes on, and here we are, how many years later, talking about that very same program.
And the other, I remember another hiccup we had was we did need a large organization like I'm going to say Big Brothers Big Sisters, Brown County Human Services, PALS, an organization like that, because you have to vet every volunteer. Volunteers are great, but you can't let a volunteer go with a minor and help a minor without proper vetting. And I think that was the other thing we really were, or maybe that was in my district. Somehow that you just have to be so careful if you're going to entrust a minor with an adult. And I think there's a liability risk there. This goes back a few
There's
years.
a lot of
so I have to
liability
think about
risks
that.
there, but yeah, there's just a lot of logistical things to work through on that. Not to say that it's not a good idea, and that idea has kept coming back over and over and over again, which tells me it's probably a good idea.
Yeah. Boys and Girls Club have something called Be Great Graduate, where they put adult mentors into schools and match them with, like, not, you know, I have 1,000 kids on my caseload, so, and not all are homeless, but like that I potentially have to deal with, but like with 20 students who are homeless or for whatever reason, and that's kind of maybe the mentoring program, but I think that would be a community need that, you know, United Way or somebody we could tap into.
Put it out there one more time.
Got
Another
a question
question?
from a guy that knows you from way back, I think.
Andrea, it's been 6 years. Good to see you.
Hi, Kevin. Hi.
Thanks
Hi,
for
Jody.
coming over to this side of the river.
Yeah.
Did you ice skate across? You've kind of touched on it, but I was interested in the opportunity to connect with like a Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Are you saying that's really not possible? Or are there some cases where the Big Brother, Big Sister program has been able to connect and help?
Not the Big Brother and Big Sister program. I think the Big Brother and Big Sister program would work if, let's say, I had a homeless student who happened to be in need of a mentor and I went through their program. But as far as what I think that question more referred to is if those of you in the audience said I could mentor a 16-year-old who's kind of on their own. Big Brothers Big Sister doesn't do that, but I'm saying a program like Big Brothers Big Sisters is what we need in this community to vet people and kind of there's a very fine line, as you know, Kevin, about my one time I tried to do this, I didn't do it properly, and my volunteer, who was awesome, started writing checks out for rent, and there's just boundaries that need to be taught, and it was too much for me, but a program like that could exist.
Right. The other question I have is really about you. You are such a blessing to the community. What led you to do the work you're doing?
That is a great question. Well, first of all, I can say my parents have always been and are non-judgmental, very open people, and wouldn't have heard of any of us judging or looking down upon anybody growing up. And that, talk about just knowing what you know, that's just what I knew. I didn't think of it any other way. And then I think the flip side, I started off at a university, ended up at UW Green Bay in the 80s, and they had a phenomenal social work program, and I just really got interested that way and got involved. And then when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you kind of know it, and things come easier when you're passionate about what you're doing.
You're an answer to the scripture, John 10:10, is you have come to give life.
Aww.
So God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.
My last question for you, Andrea, was you've been at this for 20 years, and I got to think during that 20 years you've had, I'll call it success stories, but then you've also had a whole lot of, I'm sure, challenges and kids that continue to fall through the cracks. And frustrations and all. So how do you keep going? What keeps motivating you and filling you with the spirit to be able to continue to do day after day what you do for kids in the community?
Although I truly believe that the work I'm doing, I may not see the effects of it now, or I'm in a K-5 school, so I may not see in 6 years any effects, but I believe wholeheartedly that kids who come in contact with adults, who they know genuinely love them and have their back and are there for them, you carry that with you. I just truly believe that. And I don't, being a school social worker, I'm not out in the building like a school counselor is or a teacher, so I'm not very visible. Tons of kids don't know who I am in my school, at the school, but the 20, 25 kids that I work with more regularly, they know who I am, they can count on me, to come to me. And at parents, I really enjoy working with parents. I've had parents scream at me and for various reasons. I mean, families I work with are under tons of stress. And in my earlier days, it really got to me. And now I really understand that that's where they are, and they just need someone calm and be there when they call the next day, not take their call. Just that consistency and reliability. And I don't know what to say. I can't see when I get frustrated and want to do something else. My sister's a big exec in New York City, and all the stuff when I want to do it, I don't think I could spend my life selling toilet paper, which is, she's very successful at it, but it's just, I don't know, doesn't do it for me.
Right, as he said, it's your calling, it's where you are and where God has placed you and where your passion's taken you, so good. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for the work you do and the opportunities you provide for others.
And thank you for having me. And I know this is a big topic for Tony, but just recognizing the need for more people to understand what kids and families face.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
The whole concept behind town hall is we educate ourselves as much as possible, get more awareness so that we can respond in a better, more healthy way out there. So.
And just before we close, a little commercial break. That this Sunday we have Super Bowl of Caring Sunday. So we'll have bins out in the various entrances of the church. Bins that will have an opportunity to bring soup and put soup in there, and those will go to Paul's Pantry. And then other boxes that will be available that are for putting granola bars in. And the granola bars will be going to the young people who we're talking about tonight, both in the East De Pere school system as well as the Green Bay school system. In East De Pere, there's about 30, 35 kids who are homeless. West De Pere has about 70 to 75. And of course, we know that Green Bay's got 800 and some students. So there's plenty of needs. So if you could be generous this weekend and bring soup and bring granola bars, all of that will go to a very good cause.
Good. What can we do? One person got the young Jared guy in the video to become a fireman and to take a next step and a positive step in his life. So we just have to be good examples and continue doing what we're doing. So again, thank you for coming out tonight. I hear it's got 8 inches of snow out there. Good luck getting home tonight. Just kidding. That comes tomorrow.